Well, I believe today represents a historical step forward, primarily because the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India has approved this proposal for implementation of CNAP. Now, our country has had a major problem, which is spam calls. We don't have a dedicated law on spam. The Information Technology Act 2000 is silent on spam. So consequently, trying to deal with the challenges of spam have already been a bigger issue for the last many decades. The do not call registry tried to the best extent possible, to go ahead and curb spam, but it was not very successful. Now, with the coming of AI, spammers are able to use AI for the purposes of sending spam calls. Therefore, ultimately, it was felt that there was a need for strengthening the hands of the ultimate telecom consumers and customers by introduction of the CNAP. In a layman's language, what this actually means is right now, when a call comes to you, it'll just be the mobile number or the landline number that's displayed. Once this scheme comes into force, you will have the exact name of the relevant person in whose name the said SIM card has been registered along with other technical details, so that you can take a well-informed decision whether you want to go ahead and entertain the call or not entertain the call. This will be nothing but a major step forward for the purposes of empowering telecom users against spam. It will also going to act as an advanced warning signal mechanism by means of which the telecom users are potentially going to be warned well in advance that this particular call is originating from a particular SIM that belongs to this particular party, and with these particular details. Do you want to take it or not? If you don't know the concerned party, then you would obviously not be taking the call. Right now, most of the players were using third-party applications like Truecaller, but Truecaller is not physically located within the territorial boundaries of the country. Also, there have been massive complaints about how inaccurate information has been fed into third-party applications like Truecallers. So Truecaller has not really been very successful in assisting the users to prevent themselves from becoming victims of these spam calls. It's in this context that the introduction of CNAP represents a new milestone, a new golden step forward, ultimately aimed for protecting the telecom users. It's also going to help ensure that these AI-generated telecom calls, which are done using spams or are part of scamster exercises or are even part of deepfake technologies, would invariably be forecalled upon on an advanced basis. So that ultimately the telecom user is now going to be sensitized. He has the final Brahmastra in his hands, which is whether he wants to take the call or not. And the information provided by CNAP in the form of the relevant name of the telecom subscriber in whose name the said SIM has been registered, along with other technical details, will to a large extent help the telecom users to come to a very well-informed decision as to whether the call needs to be taken or not. Now, this is going to ensure that, number one, spam calls get reduced to the bare minimum possible. Number two, it also will ensure that the telecom users themselves do not become victim of deep fake kind of electronic calls generated by artificial intelligence. It's going to lead to lesser of impersonation, lesser of electronic forgery, and is going to restore once again the confidence of the telecom users in the ability of the system to identify the origin of a call which is married to the identity of a particular person in whose name the SIM card has been issued at the time of issuance. So all said and done, it's a great step forward. This step is going to make a substantial difference. Let's see how this particular step is going to be finally implemented, because the proof of the pudding is in its eating. How, in what particular manner, the practical orientation of this particular proposal is going to take place will be dependent on more details that is coming. But this alone may not alone be your magic wand. You will require more additional supplemental steps as well. For example, India would require dedicated law to deal with spam calls. India will require a dedicated law to prevent the misuse of deepfake technologies or the misuse of artificial intelligence for telecommunication purposes, or for springing up of these spam calls. So once those elements are put in place, once appropriate enforcement powers is given to the law enforcement agencies, and once more capacity building is sensitized amongst the digital users about the efficacy and the long-term impact of these particular remedies and steps being taken by the government, they all can contribute in making the Indian telecom ecosystem far more secure, far more resilient, far more reliable, and hence will enhance the confidence and the ability of the users to take calls with complete confidence in this Indian telecom ecosystem. This is only a step forward in the direction of this proposal being approved by Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. The legal policy and the privacy ramifications have to be definitely kept in mind as we go forward. We'll have to realize that the Parliament has already passed the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023, which is dealing with protection of personal data of telecom subscribers. So when I'm applying for a SIM card and I'm giving my details, I'm giving my sensitive personal data, my personal details to the telecom service provider. If those details are going to be displayed without my consent, that will be a violation of the provisions of the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, and that could expose the telecom service providers to unprecedented fines of 250 crore rupees per one contravention. So in a scenario like this, we will have to come up with appropriate checks and balances. Number one, we will have to clarify in the draft rules under the Digital Personal Data Protection Act that maybe these kind of exemptions are going to be permissible because they're ultimately interested and are required for the purposes of protection of sovereign interests. And also, ultimately, it will be an important issue to prevent the misuse and abuse of telecommunication networks by cyber criminals and by AI cyber criminals for the purposes of targeting innocent users. Some checks and balances will have to be put in place. Those checks and balances must have the sanctity of the law, and ideally, they should form part of the draft rules under the DPDP Act in order to avoid potential legal exposure. But if you're going to implement the scheme and the current format as it is, without appropriate legal checks and balances, that could open up a Pandora's box, as more and more people could potentially be suing the telecom service providers for their failure to ensure compliance with the provisions of the DPDP Act and ultimately of the Information Technology Act 2000 and rules and regulations made thereunder. So I'm sure the government is cognizant of the privacy related ramifications. Right now, only the proposal has been accepted by TRAI. When this finally lands up at the door of the government, I'm pretty confident that the government will carve out appropriate privacy protection mechanisms so that these kinds of schemes ultimately do not become a license to impede or prejudicially impact the personal privacy or data privacy of telecom subscribers who have subscribed to SIM cards giving their genuine personal information. CNAP looks a very exciting dream. However, to convert the dream into ground reality is going to take a lot of time, effort, and energy. We have to realize that the telecom ecosystem of the country is not synchronous. You have 2G players, you have 3G players, you have 4G users, you have 5G users as well. So in this kind of a mixed bag of the telecom networks in the country, it therefore becomes very important that we must take appropriate steps to ensure that the said proposal is implemented in a harmonized, uniform manner so that users or subscribers to any particular kind of services, whether it's 2G, 3G, 4G, or 5G, are not prejudicially impacted by the implementation of this kind of a scheme. In addition, it's going to take some time. First and foremost, appropriate consultations will also have to take place with the telecom service providers. The requisite changes will also have to be made in the infrastructure architecture so as to provide the implementation of this particular new scheme. And finally, I think ultimately customers will have to be made more aware in terms of making them more sensitized about the benefits of these new schemes and how this could potentially be evolving in the times to come. It's not going to happen overnight. It will take quite some time, but at least India has begun the journey. And once you begin the journey, you have almost 50% of the battle that's won. Of course, certain teething problems will come on the way, which we'll have to keep into consideration. Legal policy ramifications pertaining to protection and preservation of privacy will have to be duly addressed. The infrastructure capabilities and connected nuances will have to be addressed. And finally, the practical teething problems in implementation of this proposal in ground reality will also have to be taken into account. But all said and done, this really represents a quantum leap moment forward for the Indian telecom ecosystem in order to rid itself of these potential ills that spam calls have begun to start ailing the ecosystem for. And I think it's a great step ultimately to re-win and regain the confidence of the users in their ability to trust the Indian technological paradigm generally and the telecommunications paradigm in particular about the same being cyber safe, cyber resilient, and cyber secure. First and foremost, it's only a good step forward. However, it's not the only step that's going to be required. If you only want to piggy ride on this step and say that's going to be the end of all evils, you're mistaken. Nothing like that is going to change overnight. Number two, there are intrinsic gray zones in the KYC regime in the country. People are routinely giving false KYC documentation for the purposes of obtaining SIM cards. Most of the time, it's fraudulent KYC documentation that's been given of non-existent addresses, non-existent IDs. So we already have a problem that there's not complete, shall I say, clarity and transparency about the quality of KYC data. Having said that, we will continue to keep on seeing more of these frauds pertaining to spam calls, pertaining to misuse of AI and deep fake technologies. So, as I said, a lot of things have to be done. Law has to be amended. The set scheme needs to be given the sanction and validity of the law. Number two, the privacy protections, both personal privacy and data privacy protections of the users need to be given appropriate focus and attention. Number three, appropriate emphasis must be made on building the right technological infrastructure for implementing such kind of schemes. Number four, finding more capacity building will have to be the ultimate mantra going forward, because if you can appropriately sensitize the users about the benefits of these kind of schemes and how they need to react or act in a particular manner so as to take the best benefits out of the scheme, then that could to a large extent contribute in sanitizing the digital telecommunication ecosystem. However, this is not to say that cyber criminals will continue to watch like a mute spectator. They will constantly keep on calibrating and evolving their own strategies so as to bypass these schemes. So constant vigil will have to be the mantra, the cost that will have to be paid by the nation as it implements this kind of schemes and other schemes. And we must supplement this by holistic approaches which are adopted at different levels, whether it's in the form of coming up with new legal frameworks, whether it's in the form of implementation and enforcement of existing legal frameworks, whether it's in the form of enhancement of infrastructure capabilities, and finally, whether it's trying to address the technological teething problems that are likely to come in, and finally, ultimately raising the bar in terms of making the users far more sensitized about the different nuances of these schemes. All of this will have to work together. One step, one scheme alone is not a guarantee to any success. One is crystal clear in that regard.